Thanks for coming, gang. My name is Bradley McAllister, and we're going to be turning Outboard today. And we're going to turn this piece of ambrosia maple. You can't hear me. Why not? Well, how about if I do that? Does that make a difference? Well, see, I had to move it out of the way so I could get my candy bar in that I had for lunch. Go ahead and mess with me. I want to see, so the problem is you move from the front row to the back. So this is 22 inches approximately. This lathe will actually do about up to 30 inches. They say it'll actually do about 36. It's 18 inches one way down to here. So you could do 36 quite easily. I was hoping for some 30s in poplar this year. Last year I had a 36-inch poplar log that I brought out for my my outboards. Couldn't find one this year. My main guy was out of wood, kind of. This is a beautiful piece of wood. And here's the deal, because they're so big and heavy and my crate weighs a ton back there, I have a second crate just for wood. So I don't make these very thick. This looks like it's probably about 2.5 inches thick. That's right at 3. So if I were to make, and this is green, it's fresh green. If I was to make a second turning out, let's turn it rough and then return it, being 22 inches, I'd need to leave it 2 inches thick. Well, that wouldn't make much for us to do out here today, now would it? So I'm going to go ahead and turn it down to whatever I feel like. And yeah, it's going to warp, but I make somebody a super deal on it, and they can take it home and have a big old warp plate in the middle of their table. So that's just what. If I didn't go ahead and turn it down to something reasonable, we just wouldn't be doing anything. So it's going to get turned one time. And like I say, if somebody would like it, just come talk to me afterwards. They're really cheap because I don't want to carry them around. She's already raised her hand. You know that they go in even denominations starting with 2s. Okay, let's get serious here. So I'm going to mount a faceplate on this guy. And it's got anchor seal on it, so I can't write on it. So I'm just going to have to do a little scratching to mark the center. If I can see that. And of course this is in the flat direction. Great, so let's go over here. We'll get close. It's not round anyway. This is one that I just rounded with a chainsaw. So I'm going to put a big old faceplate on here. What is this? I think I always forget. It's a 6-inch faceplate, steel. We'll take 18 screws if I want to. It's a countersunk on the front and the back, which I really like. When you run the screws in, the fibers tend to come up. They got to go somewhere. And so when you have a faceplate that's not countersunk, so like that one, another old, I don't know what it came from, but there's no countersink on the back. And it works, but the extra fibers don't have anywhere to go. So on these guys, I like to have something nice and solid. Now this is sitting pretty flat. Because I'm getting better with my chainsaw because I bought a 30-inch chainsaw finally. So I only have to make one pass down through the end of the log. So they're smoother. I used to have to come in here and grind these flat to where they would sit there for you. But we're going to go ahead and put a bunch of screws in this because we don't want it coming off. And once I get it mounted up there, we'll adjust that camera that's staring at my head. It's kind of hard to adjust it until I've got the piece in place, so you get the idea. I'll give you an overhead you can watch me put screws in. All right, where'd you go, camera? There we go. That'll work. I move them all around during the course of the day. What I do is I like to get just 2 screws in, make sure it's where I want it, and then I'll go ahead and just lace it around. These are deck screws with a number 20 Torx drive in them, not drywall screws. And you'll notice these are fairly short. Again, this piece is pretty thin. So, I mean, if I had a 6-inch thick piece, I'd be running 2-inch screws. But if I ran 2-inch screws in here, I'd be cutting screws. So I'm just going to lace it up with probably 18 of these that are short so they don't get in the way and I don't lose the piece. I do clutch the drill so I don't strip them out. I do want as much holding power as possible. Now it's kind of exciting because the lathe is only bolted to the plywood, which is part of it, hinged on the stage. So it can be a little dynamic as things move around. And what I've found over time is if I just slow down until I get it in balance. Once I get it in balance, I can dial it right up. But this thing probably weighs 60 pounds. And the other thing I found about turning outboard, anybody here do much outboard turning? No? Yeah. If you get into it, if you turn outboard off the end, which is perfectly normal, that mass is only rocking the short stabilization of the lathe. Legs are only this wide. This way, it's trying to rock this 4-foot footprint. And I found them to be more stable. Don't know where it went. We'll get more. Doesn't mean it won't rock and roll. So at first, it won't be turning very fast. We were talking about the other which lathe do I like best, and in the past I was using the DVR XP, the Nova out here. Well, its head didn't slide, but it rotated. Well, when I would have a 30-inch piece on here, the controls were over here. And so either you had to have the remote control wristwatch, which they were out of, which is really cool, the Dick Tracy watch. I'd used it before, or you had to reach around the spinning piece or walk around. Well, now on this lathe, I can just bring it wherever I want it. Which is, if you don't have that on your lathe, regardless of the brand, you can aftermarket retrofit your lathe to have a movable power switch. And since I've started using this one, I wouldn't go back. It's really handy. The only problem I have with it is that I forget where I put it sometimes. And I'll put it down here and I'll be reaching over there. Or I'll have it on the side of the lathe and I'll bump into it and turn the thing off in the middle of working. So we'll get, we'll mount this up, we'll get it round, we'll make the shape, the basic shape on the back side. We'll put a tenon on it, 3.5-inch set of jaws. We'll turn it around, put it in the chuck, put it back on, turn the inside of it out. And this is a beautiful looking piece of wood. So I'll be using all kinds of different tools today. I'll use carbide tools, I'll use my bowl gouges. I'll just mix it up. I'll just use whatever I feel like and to use a little bit of everything. Okay. So I'm going to start, change cameras here for you. If I can, actually, I don't know if I can do this or not. I'm on 2. Let's go to 4. Keep the numbers in my head. I'm going to start, what I want to do is I want to start with the tool rest way in here, real close and tight, but I don't think I have enough room to reach around the corner. So I'm going to end up starting with the tool rest back out here to work on this, getting it round, to work on the outer rim, if you will. So I'm going to have the tool rest at an angle. What I was thinking about doing, and if it didn't have this plate on here, would be one more thing we'd mess with. I was going to mount it up, take the tool rest, the banjo, put it up here, come in from the top to turn the outer rim. But I wasn't sure if it'll even work, and I didn't want you guys to have to stand here while I fiddled around with another one of my concepts that may or may not fly. I know this will work. go. 1 1/4 8, standard. Okay, so there we are. We're mounted up. Okay, let's see what kind of speed we can work with. So I'm going to have this thing all the way down to 0. Got it turned off, but on. Now, I want it to turn as fast as possible, but I know that I'm not going to be able to turn it very fast. Now, I'm impressed. That's 165, which seems slow, but everything slows down as the mass gets greater. I have trouble slowing down my brain sometimes to work at a slower pace. But, I mean, you're moving so much weight here that you have to be careful. And the amount of leverage on the tool rests and everything involved is incredible. How much you can, if a tool catches, it'll turn the tool rest that you tightened as tight as you can get it, it'll turn that tool rest right into the piece. So it's a whole different world that you have to be careful about. And I think that's about all the movement I really want right now. So we started out at 180, give or take. And I'll grab 10 RPM every chance I get, or 20, whatever I can get. And you'll be surprised at how quickly we'll be able to speed this guy up. And once it's in balance, it should be dialing right along. The one thing that can give you trouble, this log was pretty fresh. It hadn't been laying around long. If you have a big piece of wood or a big log that lays around on the ground for a while and picks up more moisture on one side than the other, even when you get it round, it can be out of balance. And so on something this big, you'd really be fighting it the whole time. So this one is fresh. It shouldn't give me too much trouble in that regard. So I'm going to find wherever my magic sweet spot's going to be for my tool rest to be here. So you'll be able to see. So I'm going to start with a really small tool. It might seem strange. Really big piece of wood, little teeny tool. Because this is only cut round with a chainsaw. A lot of mass. I don't want to put a big giant tool in here and get a lot of resistance. So I'm going to start with a little teeny tool and take my time. I'm also going to wear my safety mask. And I'm going to reach down here in the box and I'm going to get my easy wood tools. Don't fall down. Number 1 hollower. Little teeny guy. One of my favorite tools though. And I'm going to use this just to start getting the corners off. Does anybody have any questions before I start making a little bit of a mess? I mean, anytime, just raise your hand, throw something at me when I'm not cutting. Let me see what I got in the box. Uh-oh. Always have a plan B. Gotta wear something. All right. I'm gonna assume somewhere there's the center of this guy that I'm pretty close. Okay. So even though it's a big giant piece of wood, I'm gonna hold the tool like I always do, lightly, a couple fingers on top of it. Nothing real crazy. I'm gonna start right here on this corner. Get where I can see again what's going on. Right here on this corner, and I'm just going to ease into here. I like this because I can watch the wood and I can watch y'all's reactions at the same time. So you can see how much it's kicking that tool. So you can imagine if I had a big tool on there, it didn't hit even more. So and I just kind of let the tool go ahead and ride back and forth. I'm not trying to stop it and force it to cut. I just let it go ahead and just kind of ride along there. I always think of it like a galloping horse. Now this is kind of the boring part of the whole project, but it is necessary. Now you may be asking, well, what if you didn't have one of these little round cutters, right? What would I use? See, this one I like because it's got this real thick shaft to it. If I didn't have that particular tool, I would grab a 1/2 inch bowl gouge from somewhere because it's got a big shaft, and I will use just the very tip. Even though it's a little bit bigger than that, still I'm just going to use the very, very tip. I can use any wings whatsoever. So if this was my option, with the tool locked in, and again, it's a little more aggressive, but you can accomplish the same thing. But you see how it kicks around a little bit more, just because there's more surface area there. But if that's what I had, that's what I would use. But since I have the smaller tool, I'm going to stay with it. What I'm trying to do, I want to get this back corner, this very back corner, so I can come around a little bit further. I can probably move a little bit already. But not a lot. Always double check. I mean, the theory would be that whatever you're cutting